Yeah, I was kind of surprised. Only in the last few weeks have I been seeing like clips with the aliens in there. Was that a conscious decision about not revealing too much?
Ever wonder if that weird neighbor is actually from another galaxy? In 1997, Men in Black convinced us the answer was a resounding yes. Blending slick suits with slime-covered extraterrestrials, it redefined the summer blockbuster and turned Will Smith into a global icon. But behind those iconic Ray-Bans lies a galaxy of production chaos, bizarre casting near misses, and disgusting practical effects. Grab your neutralizer and get ready, because we're exposing the wildest secrets that the agency tried to hide. 20. The gritty comic book roots. Believe it or not, the universe of Men in Black didn't start as a laugh-out-loud comedy. It actually originated from a niche comic book series written by Lowell Cunningham in 1990. In the original pages, the MIB agents were far more sinister than the lovable duo of J and K. They weren't just monitoring alien activity. They were a cold shadow organization dedicated to maintaining world order by any means necessary. This included silencing human witnesses permanently, rather than just using a flashy neuralizer to wipe their memories. The comics also featured the agents dealing with paranormal threats like demons, ghosts, and nijinshu legendary monsters, rather than sticking strictly to extraterrestrial visitors. When director Barry Sonnenfeld and the producers got their hands on the property, they realized that a grim government agency might not sell many movie tickets or action figures. They decided to pivot toward a police procedural in space vibe, injecting the dry humor and buddy cop chemistry that we now associate with the franchise. This shift was a massive gamble that paid off, transforming a dark, underground graphic novel into a bright pop culture phenomenon. Without this tonal makeover, we never would have seen Will Smith cracking jokes or a talking pug. It's a classic case of Hollywood taking a rough, jagged diamond and polishing it into a shiny, multi-billion-dollar masterpiece for the masses. 19. The casting that almost changed history. It is nearly impossible to imagine Men in Black without the legendary pairing of Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. But the original casting wish list looked like a completely different movie. Initially, the producers had their sights set on Chris O'Donnell for the role of Agent J. At the time, O'Donnell was a massive star coming off the Batman films, but he reportedly turned the role down because he didn't want to play another rookie character. Meanwhile, for the role of Agent K, the studio actually wanted Clint Eastwood. Imagine the legendary Dirty Harry himself hunting aliens with his trademark scowl. When Eastwood declined, the search continued. Even David Schwimmer, at the height of his Friends fame, was offered the role of Jay but turned it down to direct his own project. Director Barry Sonnenfeld was the one who fought hard for Will Smith after seeing his performance in 6 Degrees of Separation. He even had to use a bit of trickery to get his way. To discourage Chris O'Donnell, Sonnenfeld told him the script wasn't actually that good, and he might be better off skipping it. It was a risky move that worked perfectly. Once Smith and Jones were locked in, their grumpy old man meets fast-talking rookie dynamic became the heartbeat of the film, proving that sometimes the best casting happens by total accident. 18. Thousands of living, hissing co-stars. If you have a phobia of bugs, the final act of Men in Black is probably your worst nightmare, and the reality on set was even grosser. For the climactic scene where Agent J taunts the giant Edgar the Bug by squashing his cockroach relatives, the production didn't just rely on CGI or rubber props. They used thousands of live Madagascar hissing cockroaches. These aren't your average kitchen pests. They are huge, sturdy, and loud. Because the American Humane Association has very strict rules about how animals, even insects, are treated on film sets, the production had to be incredibly careful. Will Smith wasn't actually crushing real bugs under his feet. He was stepping on small bags of mustard and soy sauce to create that sickening crunch sound and gooey visual. However, the live roaches were still everywhere. Each bug had to be accounted for, and the crew actually had to use roach wranglers to ensure none of them escaped into the studio or were accidentally stepped on by the crew. They even had to check the perimeter of the set every day to make sure the population remained stable. The actors had to maintain their composure, while thousands of these creepy crawlies scurried around their boots. 17. Spielberg's last-minute rescue. Steven Spielberg served as an executive producer on the film, and his influence was felt most strongly during a moment of crisis near the end of production. Originally, the movie was supposed to end with a high-concept philosophical debate between Agent J and the bug. It was a battle of wits rather than a battle of lasers. However, after seeing the early cuts, Spielberg and the team realized that a summer blockbuster needs a big, explosive payoff. They felt the audience would be disappointed if they didn't get to see a massive alien showdown. This led to a very expensive last-minute decision to scrap the talking ending and replace it with the action-packed finale we see today, where K is swallowed by the bug and J has to fight it solo. This change cost millions of dollars because it required massive amounts of new CGI and practical effects from Rick Baker's Creature Shop. It also meant they had to completely redesign the bug's final form to be more menacing and physical. Sonnenfeld later admitted that Spielberg was absolutely right. The shift from a cerebral ending to a visceral, gooey monster fight provided the wow factor that helped the film earn over $500 million at the global box office. It just goes to show that even when a script is great, sometimes you just need a giant monster to eat the protagonist. 16. The noisy cricket practical joke. One of the most memorable running gags in the movie is the noisy cricket, the tiny, palm-sized gun that packs enough punch to send Agent J flying through storefront windows. While the weapon is a fan favorite now, it actually started as a bit of a psychological game on set. When the prop department first showed Will Smith the tiny gun, he genuinely thought they were joking. He had spent the whole movie seeing Tommy Lee Jones carry around the massive, cool-looking Series 4 deatomizer, and he was expecting something equally badass. Barry Sonnenfeld intentionally played up the disappointment, leaning into the idea that the new guy gets the wimpy-looking gear. Smith's genuine reaction of confusion and slight annoyance was exactly what the director wanted for the character. The irony, of course, was that the smallest gun in the MIB arsenal was actually the most destructive. To make the gag work, the stunt team had to wire Will Smith to high-tension cables. Every time he fired the prop, he would be violently yanked backward to simulate the massive recoil. It was physically demanding and often painful, but Smith's comedic timing turned those stunts into some of the film's biggest laughs. The noisy cricket became a symbol for the movie itself, something that looks small and unassuming, but carries a massive, unexpected impact on the world. That was just the warm-up. Now, let's see how deep this alien rabbit hole goes. 15. The agony of Edgar the Bug. Vincent D'Onofrio's performance as Edgar is a masterclass in physical acting, but it came at a high physical price. To capture the unsettling movement of a giant alien cockroach wearing a human skin suit, D'Onofrio devised a grueling method. He decided that Edgar's human form shouldn't be able to move its joints properly. To achieve this, he wrapped his legs in heavy-duty sports braces and locked his ankles so he couldn't bend them. He also wore a set of restrictive back braces that forced him to walk with a stiff, stumbling gait. Every step he took on set was a genuine struggle against his own body. He spent weeks studying nature documentaries of insects to mimic their jerky, twitching head movements. On top of the physical strain, the makeup process took 6 hours every morning. Layers of glue and silicone were applied to pull his face into that iconic melting look. By the end of a long shooting day, his skin was irritated, and his muscles were exhausted from the unnatural posture. D'Onofrio's commitment was so intense that many crew members were actually unsettled by his presence on set. He didn't just play a monster, he lived in a state of constant discomfort to ensure that the audience felt the wrongness of his character in every frame. It remains one of the most underrated physical performances in cinema. 14. A galaxy-sized script rewrite. The Men in Black. We Know is a quintessentially New York City movie, but the original script by Ed Solomon was a globe-trotting adventure. In the first draft, the story wasn't contained to the Big Apple. It moved through underground bases in Nevada, the streets of Washington, D.C., and even Kansas. The scope was massive, but Barry Sonnenfeld felt the film was losing its identity by moving around too much. He realized that New York was the perfect setting because, as the joke goes, New Yorkers wouldn't even notice an alien walking down the street. He pushed for a massive rewrite to centralize the action. This required cutting entire sequences and reimagining the MIB headquarters as a hidden part of the city's infrastructure, like the Queens Midtown Tunnel Ventilation Building. This change also allowed the city's unique landmarks, like the Unisphere from the 1964 World's Fair, to become integral plot points. The rewrite also simplified the ending. Originally, the plot involving the Arquillian Galaxy was much more complex, involving multiple warring factions and a convoluted political backstory. The decision to trim the fat and focus on a single cat-and-mouse chase through the city saved the movie's pacing. It turned a sprawling, messy sci-fi epic into a tight, focused, and hilarious urban fantasy that felt grounded in a reality we could almost recognize. 13. The diva known as Frank. Frank the Pug is arguably the most famous canine in sci-fi history, but his real-life counterpart, a pug named Mushu, was a bit of a handful. While Frank appears as a wisecracking, cigar-smoking alien in a dog suit, Mushu was a pampered professional who required a high level of care. Because pugs are prone to overheating and respiratory issues, the crew had to treat the dog like a superstar. Mushu had his own dedicated trailer and a cooling system to keep him comfortable between takes. During the famous scene where Agent J shakes Frank to get information, the shaking was actually achieved through clever camera work and a gentle hand, as the trainers were very protective of their star. Mushu was also flown first class to various promotional events, often staying in high-end hotels that allowed pets. His trainer once joked that the dog had a better travel itinerary than most of the human crew. Interestingly, as Mushu aged between the first and second films, the makeup team had to use vegetable-based dye to cover up his graying fur, so he would look identical to his younger self. Despite the diva requirements, Mushu's natural expressive face was a goldmine for the animators who later added the digital mouth movements. He was a one-of-a-kind performer who proved that sometimes the smallest actors have the biggest egos. 12. Danny Elfman's reluctant masterpiece. When Danny Elfman was approached to score Men in Black, he was initially hesitant. He had already established a dark, gothic sound through his work with Tim Burton on Batman and Edward Scissorhands, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to tackle another comic book movie. However, once he saw the chemistry between Smith and Jones, he realized the score needed to be a hybrid of genres. He created a sci-fi noir sound that blended traditional orchestral elements with quirky, jazzy rhythms. The iconic main theme, with its driving bass line and eerie woodwinds, perfectly captured the film's cool yet creepy vibe. Interestingly, the score was almost rejected by the studio because they wanted something more traditional and heroic. They were worried Elfman's work was too eccentric for a summer blockbuster. Director Barry Sonnenfeld fought for the music, arguing that the quirkiness was exactly what the film needed to stand out. Elfman eventually won an Academy Award nomination for his work, and the music became an inseparable part of the MIB brand. Even today, just a few notes of that bass line can instantly transport listeners back to the 90s. It was a lesson in trusting a composer's unique voice over safe, corporate choices. Elfman's weird sounds provided the perfect sonic backdrop for a world where nothing is quite what it seems on the surface. 11. The kitchen tool from the future. The neutralizer is one of the most iconic props in movie history, but its sleek, high-tech design has a very humble origin. The prop department was tasked with creating a device that looked like it belonged to an advanced civilization, but was also small enough to fit in a pocket. After several failed prototypes that looked too much like flashlights or TV remotes, the designers found inspiration in a high-end kitchen store. The basic shape and pop-up mechanism of the neutralizer were actually inspired by a stylish stainless steel pepper grinder. The designers took the sleek, cylindrical aesthetic of modern kitchenware and added fiber optic lights and intricate dials to give it that alien tech feel. Each neutralizer used on set was a precision-engineered piece of equipment, costing thousands of dollars to build. They were made of machined aluminum and featured real moving parts that had to work perfectly on camera every time. Because they were so expensive and fragile, the actors were strictly forbidden from playing with them between takes. Will Smith, known for his high energy, reportedly had a hard time resisting the urge to click the device open and shut constantly. When you see the red lights flash on screen, remember that the memory wiper was born from the same design philosophy that gives us fancy table salt. It's a perfect example of how Hollywood can turn the mundane into the magical. You might want to put on your shades, because things are about to get bright. The theme song that almost wasn't. Will Smith is synonymous with the Men in Black theme song, but that catchy track wasn't part of the original production plan. The movie was essentially finished when the producers realized they lacked a powerhouse marketing hook for the radio. Will Smith, who was transitioning from the Fresh Prince to a serious movie star, stepped up to the plate. He worked with producers to sample Patrice Rushen's Forget-Me-Nots, creating a hip-hop anthem that perfectly summarized the film's plot. However, there was a major internal debate about whether a rap song would clash with Danny Elfman's orchestral score. The studio eventually rolled the dice, and the results were staggering. The song didn't just promote the movie. It became a global #1 hit, topping charts in multiple countries and winning a Grammy Award. The music video was equally ambitious, featuring a CGI alien dancing alongside Smith, which was a technological marvel for 1997. This synergy between music and film became the blueprint for Will Smith's career over the next decade. It turned the movie into a multimedia event, proving that a great theme song is sometimes just as important as the script itself. Interestingly, the lyrics act as a literal briefing for the MIB agency, making it perhaps the most informative marketing jingle in the history of cinema. 9. The Ray-Ban Resurrection. In the mid-90s, Ray-Ban was struggling. Their classic Predator 2 model was far from being a fashion staple until Agent J and Agent K put them on. The film's costume designer, Mary Vogt, wanted the agents to look like cool, timeless silhouettes, and the all-black shades were the final touch. Once the film hit theaters, the impact on the fashion industry was immediate and overwhelming. Sales of the Predator 2 sunglasses reportedly skyrocketed by 300% at almost overnight. Ray-Ban went from a brand in a slump to the height of 90s cool, all thanks to two guys in suits fighting aliens. The marketing team was so surprised by the surge that they had to scramble to ramp up production to meet the sudden demand. It wasn't just a product placement, it was a cultural shift. The image of the agents in their suits and shades became so iconic that it was parodied and imitated for years to come. Even today, the MIB look is the first thing people think of when they see those specific frames. This success proved the incredible power of film to influence consumer behavior. Ray-Ban owes a massive debt to the agency, as the movie effectively saved that specific line of eyewear from being discontinued and turned it into a permanent piece of pop culture history. 8. The intergalactic Kegel and deleted scenes. The Creature Shop, led by Rick Baker, created dozens of aliens that never even made it to the final cut of the film. One of the most famous lost creatures was a bizarre entity known as the intergalactic Kegel. This alien was a massive, sentient being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a pile of laundry. Baker and his team spent weeks building a complex animatronic for it, only for the scene to be cut because it slowed down the movie's brisk pacing. Another deleted sequence involved a much longer introduction to the MIB headquarters, featuring a variety of background aliens that were deemed too weird even for this movie. Some of these discarded designs were so creative that they were eventually repurposed for the sequels or transformed into background characters in the alien immigration scenes. The sheer volume of work that went into these lost aliens is a testament to the dedication of the practical effects team. They weren't just making a movie, they were building an entire ecosystem. While many of these creatures only exist in behind-the-scenes photos and sketches today, their DNA lives on in the rich, lived-in feel of the MIB universe. 7. Real-life celebrity aliens. One of the funniest running gags in the movie is the surveillance screen at MIB headquarters that tracks registered aliens living among us. If you look closely at that screen, you'll see some very famous faces that were officially outed as extraterrestrials by the agency. The list includes Sylvester Stallone, Danny DeVito, Dionne Warwick, Newt Gingrich, and even the legendary sci-fi author Isaac Asimov. Director Barry Sonnenfeld personally chose these celebrities based on who he thought had a unique or otherworldly energy. To get permission to use their likenesses, the production had to reach out to each individual. Most of them thought the idea was hilarious and signed off immediately. Sylvester Stallone was reportedly a big fan of the joke. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, also makes a cameo on the screen, which served as a nice nod from one sci-fi giant to another. Even director Barry Sonnenfeld and his daughter appear on the monitor as aliens. This small detail added a layer of meta-humor to the film, suggesting that Hollywood and politics are actually run by visitors from other planets. It's a gag that rewards fans for pausing their VHS tapes and looking closely at the background, cementing the film's reputation for having incredible attention to detail. 6. The tunnel scene's practical magic. The scene where the MIB Ford Ltd POS drives upside down on the ceiling of the Queens Midtown Tunnel is a highlight of the film, and it was achieved using a mix of massive sets and early digital effects. While the car itself was a real 1987 Ford, the production had to build several specialized versions for the stunt. One version was a hollowed-out shell that could be flipped on a massive rotating rig. The actors, Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, were actually strapped into a cockpit that rotated 180 degrees to simulate the gravity-defying maneuver. Will Smith later recalled that filming the scene was a nauseating experience, as they had to hang upside down for long periods while delivering their lines. To make the tunnel look realistic, the crew used a combination of a miniature model of the tunnel and a full-scale section built on a soundstage. The red button transformation, where the car sprouts jet engines and sleek chrome plating, was one of the most complex shots for the CGI team at the time. Despite the high-tech look, the heart of the scene was the practical chemistry between the two leads as they bounced around the cabin. 5. Winning a role at the poker table. Linda Fiorentino, who played the dry-witted coroner Dr. Laurel Weaver, didn't get her role through a traditional audition. According to Hollywood legend, she actually won the part during a high-stakes poker game with director Barry Sonnenfeld. While the details of the game vary depending on who tells the story, the consensus is that Sonnenfeld was so impressed by Fiorentino's cool demeanor and sharp wit during the game that he realized she was perfect for the role of the unflappable medical examiner. Dr. Weaver needed to be someone who could look at a dead alien and crack a joke without blinking. And Fiorentino had that energy in spades. Her performance provided a much-needed female perspective in the boys' club of the MYB, and her chemistry with Will Smith added a layer of romantic tension that was rare for the genre. She played the character with a cynical, noir-inspired edge that balanced out the film's more cartoonish elements. Interestingly, despite her character becoming an agent at the end of the first film, she didn't return for the sequel. Rumors suggested that she was difficult to work with on set, but her contribution to the original film remains a fan favorite. 4. The philosophical ending that died. Before the big bug fight was added, the original climax was a deep, intellectual conversation. Agent J and the bug were supposed to have a standoff where they debated the nature of existence and the insignificance of humanity in the grand scheme of the universe. The bug was meant to explain that Earth was just a tiny, unimportant speck in a much larger cosmic war, and J was supposed to prove that humanity was worth saving because of its capacity for wonder. While this sounds like great sci-fi, it didn't play well in test screenings. Audiences found the ending preachy and slow, and they were frustrated that they didn't get to see a big action payoff after 2 hours of build-up. This led to the frantic, multi-million-dollar reshoots that gave us the "eaten by a bug" sequence. Even though the philosophical debate was cut, remnants of those ideas still exist in the film's final moments, specifically the galaxy on Orion's belt reveal and the final shot of our universe being a marble in an alien's game. These moments kept the big ideas intact while still giving the audience the popcorn thrills they craved. Hold on to your lug nuts, because we're entering the final stretch of the galaxy. 3. Tommy Lee Jones and the Straight Man Fear. While Tommy Lee Jones seems like he was born to play the stoic Agent K, he was initially terrified of the role for a very specific reason. Jones was worried that being the straight man to Will Smith's high-energy comedy would make him look boring or, worse, completely invisible to the audience. He had spent his career playing intense, dramatic leads, and the idea of playing a character who remains stone-faced while chaos erupts around him felt like a massive risk. Director Barry Sonnenfeld had to spend a significant amount of time convincing Jones that the humor of the film actually relied entirely on his deadpan delivery. The director explained that the straighter Jones played it, the funnier Will Smith would be, and vice versa. It was the friction between their two styles that created the comedic sparks. Once Jones embraced the less is more approach, he delivered a masterclass in reactionary acting. He realized that Kay's lack of a reaction was often the funniest part of the scene. This dynamic became the gold standard for the buddy cop genre in the years that followed. 2. The grossest sound effects in the galaxy. The sound design of Men in Black is just as important as the visuals when it comes to creating a believable alien world. And the Foley artists had to get creative to find the right noises. One of the most famous examples is the sound of the alien Jebs having his head regrown after being shot off. To create that wet, squelching, and bone-crunching sound, the sound team didn't use high-tech synthesizers. Instead, they went to the grocery store. They experimented with a variety of food items, eventually settling on a combination of squishing leather gloves, popping bubble wrap, and most importantly, manipulating a giant bowl of wet, overcooked macaroni and cheese. The mac and cheese sound provided that perfect gooey texture that made audiences cringe in their seats. For the sounds of the various alien slimes and fluids, they used everything from canned peaches to raw meat being dropped onto hard surfaces. The sound of the bug's wings was created by flapping leather belts and recording the hum of a malfunctioning industrial fan. These organic, living sounds gave the aliens a physical presence that CGI alone could never achieve. 1. Rick Baker's budget-busting genius. Rick Baker is a legend in the world of special effects makeup, and Men in Black was one of his most ambitious projects to date. Baker and his team were responsible for creating hundreds of unique alien designs, many of which required complex animatronics and prosthetic appliances. However, Baker's commitment to quality almost broke the film's budget. He insisted on building full-scale, functioning models for as many aliens as possible, rather than relying on digital placeholders. This meant that even background characters were masterpieces of engineering. The Mickey alien, for example, was a fully motorized puppet that required several operators to move its eyes, mouth, and limbs. As the production went on and the script continued to evolve, Baker's team had to work around the clock to redesign characters on the fly. At one point, the cost of the creature shop was rising so fast that the studio executives became nervous. However, when they saw the footage of the worm guys drinking coffee in the break room, they realized that Baker's practical effects were the heart and soul of the movie. Baker eventually won the Academy Award for Best Makeup for his work on the film, proving that every penny spent on latex, silicone, and animatronics was worth it. Stay tuned to our channel for more intergalactic secrets, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single upload.